some people have very strong opinions that there's a big difference. I see it from all kind of lots of angles, I guess, because my own practice varies so much from page to page, not even from journal to journal. It varies.
I started teaching what I called creative journaling about 8 years ago, and I hadn't really encountered art journaling at that time. I'm not sure if it wasn't as popular yet or if I just hadn't come across it, but I did find it online quite shortly after, and I was like, oh yay, this is so great, other people are doing this too. And then the more I looked, the more I was like, oh, there's something actually different happening in the art journaling world than what it is that I'm teaching here with what I was calling creative journaling, which I think is the same as visual journaling. In the art journaling, it feels like there's a tendency to make it all about the art or more about the art. And so for me, that's a sketchbook. So that's similar to what I did in university. I studied fashion design. We had to keep sketchbooks. We had drawings. We would collage, pictures of things that inspired us in there. We would write about our ideas and write about our inspiration and write about what we wanted to do.
Back in art school, we used to keep these books that we called sketchbooks. And, it was writing down ideas and taping things in, things that inspired you, or trying out new supplies, seeing how they worked with other supplies, sketching out bigger projects and things that you were going to create, all of that. And each sketchbook, to me, every artist's sketchbook or whatever, always seemed like a work of art. And just like every writer's journal is kind of a work of art in and of itself. So I've kept a sketchbook of some kind my whole life. And so when this art journaling thing came along, I was really curious. And so we see it kind of evolving into this different thing, like somewhere between the traditional sketchbook keeping and like book art even.
I think art journaling is, first of all, something you're planning to show. You're trying to make a product with certain techniques and a certain look. And in that sense, it reminds me a little bit about how scrapbooking is done, where there's different layouts and themes, and you're going for a very sort of precise look. You're going for a look, you're going for an outcome. And it's to show other people. It's meant to be shared.
To me, art journaling is something that is very visual, or mostly visual, I would say. And at first, I approached it like I see many others do, using it as a place to practice mixed media art in a contained place. So this is my first art journal. As you can see, it's very bold, it's very colorful, and I guess you could call it artsy even. I practice a lot of techniques in this journal, and there's not many words, there's some, but the more that I worked in an art journal, I quickly began to see that art journaling can be so much more than that if you allow it to be. It could be a tool to process your emotions, or to express subconscious thoughts, or even just to practice following your intuition. But even then, there does seem to be a lot of pressure to make something beautiful.
Art journaling to me is really my place to explore my inner landscape. That's the best way to describe it. When I come to my art journal, I tend to use just acrylic paints, maybe a little bit of collage elements, and I just go at it. There's layers, things kind of don't make sense, I play with colors. I do what I call my fearless painting process, so I just let it all come out. And a lot of times it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I might throw a little bit of writing in here and there, but it tends to look, here's one of my most current art journals. It's kind of bold and, got a lot of stuff going on. And yeah, that's kind of what my art journal is about. It's all over the place. It's kind of bold. It's just letting it out.
Art journal, like for me, is going to be pages that really are more like visual. Like there's no necessarily words that are popping up, or if there are, they're minimal, or they're considered well considered and kind of placed or kept for a certain reason, the pages become just like these little mini paintings.
So in visual or creative journaling, it's about the journaling, it's about the process, well, your inner process being the first part, and the art is there to support your process. So this is obviously very strongly borrowed from art therapy, where it talks about art as process and not art as product.
A visual or creative journal, I believe, is something that is more likely to be considered an actual journal. As I developed my art journaling practice, I began to notice an urge to make a bigger separation between wanting to practice my art and expressing myself. So I started working in 2 separate journals. And the more I was able to let go of the notion to make a pretty page in my new journal, the more I was able to tap into my intuition and really create a healing practice. And as you can see, there's more words, there's more journaling happening. It's less artsy and more of just some like simple visual elements happening. And it's more personal. So the more I worked in this journal, the more I started to realize that it was becoming less and less like what I considered to be an art journal. So that's when I decided to call this practice of just freely letting it all out onto the page visual journaling.
A visual journal often looks more like sketchy to me. Maybe there are things that are taped in, fodder, pictures, ideas. It isn't something that is necessarily meant to be a finished product or finished page for presentation. Maybe not meant to be shared. It's more personal.
And I think of a regular journal, whether it's a written journal or a visual journal, or I've been using the term creative journaling too, because I'm trying to open it up, I guess. I don't know if it's good to try to open up the definition, but creative journaling, meaning that it incorporates mixed media, art and photography and writing and painting. To me, the key word is journal, and a journal is something that is first and foremost private.
So the pages are kind of like a mix between journaling, but there's color and image, photos, all that kind of stuff. Oftentimes I'll put calendar pages in them. So that would be a visual journal. Field guides make me think visual journal a little bit. And yet I don't think they're necessarily different than art journaling. They just are a different expression of that. All of it's art in my book.
My visual journal, on the other hand, is really more about exploring my exterior landscape. And here's my latest visual journal. I've had this for a few months and I made a sweet little cover for it. And I keep this with me all the time. It's in my purse along with watercolors, a little bottle of water, and some pens and ink. And I seriously visual journal quite often, and it's a little bit of a different feel to it, different frequency, if you may. And as you can see, it tends to be all in watercolor, and I do a lot more writing in my visual journal, and I'm really documenting, you know, things that are around me and practicing my drawing and just, yeah, getting visual, I guess you can say.
I think a journal is something we keep for ourselves. It's private. And when I look around and see what's happening with art journaling, a lot of it seems to be focused on learning techniques and making a certain type of outcome that we are automatically going to be showing to other people. So I think if the intent is that we're making something for a certain outcome in a product and that we're showing it to other people, it's a little bit different than journaling. I mean, it's a lot different than journaling because the privacy is out the window. And then we're bringing in this level of comparison and even judgment in terms of other people looking at our work. So then I think it's not even journaling at all. It's keeping a sketchbook.
The real difference for me with creative or visual journaling is the depth that you're going to, and the focus.
In terms of the difference, I always just think of it in terms of intention.
For me, the real difference between the two is how I approach each journal.
So I think that's the real difference, is the depth of where you're going to go with your journaling, right? So if it's all about the art and it's all about having it look a certain way, then you do have to make your inner process be less important.
I'm not trying to make a piece of art every time I sit down to journal. And if I was, I would never do it. It would be too intimidating. So I really think of the journal, whether you call it an art journal or a creativity journal or visual journal or a sketchbook, it's a place where you can be free to do anything at all.
The interesting thing is that both my art journal and my visual journal are really, really insightful to me. And when I come to either one of these, I'm usually looking for clarity around something. And the art journal, I can gain a lot of inner clarity, and just by kind of letting it all out and just fulfilling that process. And then with my external or my visual journal, and where I kind of copy, or not copy, but paint what I see around me, a lot of times I get clarity by, and that's why there's a lot of writing, there's clarity by really taking time to look at my surroundings.
For me, they become places of intuitive process, art making, where I'm intentionally trying to move out of my thoughts, out of word form, and into a different form of language. And I think that's a key point, because a lot of people believe that if you're art journaling, that journaling implies writing, and that writing has to be involved in order for it to be an art journal. I don't really hold that same belief. I believe that communication also extends into imagery and visual, and we create our own languages through imagery and color and what our preferences are and what we move through when we're working with our own world of visualization and imagery and what lands on the page coming through us.
So now when I come to my new art journal, I come to it to play, to practice my art, to develop an art technique. Or, you know, if I'm feeling inspired by something, I'll come to this journal. And it's mostly to fulfill my creative urges. But there are times, like for example, when I'm working through, like say, a 21 Secrets exercise, there are times when I learn something about myself through this process of just making the art. And so with my visual journal, I come to it to express something, to put something down on the page, to journal, no matter how ugly or raw it may be. It's just to get myself down on the page, to write, to express myself. And to have that freedom just to let it all out and learn something about myself in the process.
The visual or creative journaling, the place where you're going more into the depth, into your own process, that's really, really important for your growth as a creative and spiritual being. It's a really different process, and often it does require it requires more of you. In my experience, I needed teachers who were kind of in a deeper place than I was to help me move into deeper places in myself. But whatever it is that you need that's going to help you, I think you need to look at that. What's going to support me in going deeper into my own process? rather than, how can I create better looking pages, right? I think that's just a much more interesting question and a much more helpful thing for you to be doing in your journal.
To me, and where my work really comes from, is the healing aspect of it. That's where it began for me, and that's where it continues to go. And it's ultimately very personal. Healing is personal. It's a spiritual journey. That's how I think about it. It takes us places we don't know where we're going to go. So if we have the freedom to not have to show what we're doing, then we also don't have to understand what we're doing for ourselves. We don't have to explain it or define it for ourselves. And that opens up so much freedom. I always tell my students, where else can you have the luxury of not knowing what the hell you're doing? Do it on the paper. I think it's just great that everyone's journaling, no matter what they call it. And what we call it isn't so important. It's just that we do it and we share it.
Quite frankly, I don't think there's much of a difference at the end of the day, unless you need there to be. So I use creative journaling, art journaling, visual journaling, sketchbooking interchangeably at times. And it's because some people are sensitive and prefer one over the other. Some people don't self-identify as an artist. And so art journaling feels scary. It feels inhibitive, or like it belongs to someone else. But creative journaling or visual journaling, we can all get on board with that and then start to move color around, start to move words around, paint over our words. And then through that, we're awakening our creative process and awakening our language of imagery and color and vision and that. And so I think it's really up to you what the difference is between art and visual journaling, and if that even matters to you. So at the core of my heart, I don't see much of a difference. Visual journals, sketchbooks, art journals, it's all art to me. Life is art for me. It's a way of living and a way of approaching life. That's what art is. So call it what you will. It's all very beautiful.